Hi, welcome to another episode of Pallets to Pints. We're going to do this one a little bit differently. The whole goal of the series was to bring industry individuals from the beer distribution space to share some knowledge, insights, some thought-provoking conversation. But we also have to recognize that we have a lot of that experience at Rehrig Pacific ourselves. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Carter, Director of Sales for Beer at Rehrig Pacific, and we're here to share a little insight around what we're seeing in the market today. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Clay. Looking forward to it.
So what we wanted to talk about today was a little bit around the trends in the industry, what we're seeing from some of our partners, whether that be vendors, suppliers, customers, and kind of deep dive into a few specific topics with the ultimate goal of uncovering a little bit of insight. So before we get started, cheers and thanks for joining me.
Cheers.
Now, Dan, let's just start right to it. What you see in the beer space right now, let's just keep it to 2025. What has caught your attention? What are some of your customers talking about? What is really the hot button issues or things of focus for them that have got your attention?
Yeah, in 2025, the elephant in the room has been a little bit of a volume dip in the beer space. It's been a little bit of a few years in the making. You see macro trends as it relates to the younger generations maybe not participating in alcohol consumption as much and being more sober curious, looking to alternatives. And so a lot of the conversations happening within the space right now are about how to control what's within the four walls of a beer distributorship in order to offset maybe some of the drop in volume that we've seen so far this year. I will say there's a lot of optimism in the space right now in terms of some of those solutions, what they look like, different SKUs that they're taking on and how they're doing in the market, as well as technology that's being implemented in the space in order to, again, offset some of those drops in volume.
I'm glad you brought that up because we hear it at every industry event or at NBWA, the dip in volume. There's no getting around that. But you don't see distributors stopping innovation, stopping growth, acquisitions, building new sites. We're lucky enough today to be at Eagle Rock's newest facility. It's beautiful. They wouldn't make those types of investments if they didn't believe into the long-term outlook of this industry. So what specifically has got these distributors excited about how they're going to be able to overcome that, whether it's a temporary or long-term dip in volume, but what are they going to do to offset that? What's got them and their focus on right now?
Like I mentioned, technology's been a big push there, and I think we're at a little bit of a crossroads as it relates to AI introducing itself into operations. Not just within the four walls of distributorship, but how to make decisions on what products to keep on the shelves within a retail location. And all of those bits of data that you can leverage AI for can help drive data-driven insights into improving how we're going to market within the beer space.
I'm seeing something very similar, especially when it comes to making the decision on what SKU I'm going to carry and why, and using tools like AI to do a lot of that heavy lifting. I had a conversation with a partner of ours where they were talking about having to eliminate SKUs, not because of maybe volume, but what's the cost of acquisition for that case? What's the cost to deliver it? How frequently are they going to deliver it? Where is it going to be going to, whether it's on-premise, bulk, C-suite, and really making decisions to either limit or expand into those markets. And I think it's a fascinating application. I know there's a lot of tools that are being put in the hands of the sales team now to do a lot of that analysis, to move away from gut feelings around what customers want, and using more of the data-driven decision-making to ultimately fill those orders, fill trucks, maximize, whether it's what's going on a pallet, what's going in a truck, how often I'm going to deliver into those stores to try and squeeze out any sort of inefficiencies within their delivery. So I really like to see those applications expanding.
Yeah, I'm glad you called out kind of removing the gut feeling from it. It's more important now, more than ever, to look at that because of all the new SKUs and products being introduced into the space. You're seeing the introduction of Delta 9, and a lot of distributors don't know what to do with it and don't know what products are going to move fastest and what are just going to take up shelf space in the warehouse. So that type of technological solution, leveraging AI, to identify trends in the market is really helping distributors make smart decisions about what to keep in the warehouse.
I'm going to take what you said about Delta 9 and go in a slightly different direction. So I was at a coalition meeting. It was made up of vendors like us, solutions providers, distributors, breweries themselves. And that topic came up. And there was a mixed bag of emotions around fear, excitement, opportunity, or just confusion. Mm-hmm. And I think that is heavily tied to whether it's legislation today or where the farm bill may go, but also fear around protecting their businesses. And so if there's the decision to move into Delta 9 or THC, do I need to separate those entities, create a new LLC to distribute that product? They don't quite know what to do, or if that's going to last. If I make a decision and policy changes in a couple of months, have I made an investment that's worth nothing now? And so that was definitely a hot topic item. What are you hearing from some of your customers around those alternate substances or RTC or RTDs or non-alc SKUs? What's their position on that? Are they all in, subjectively on certain ones, or waiting and seeing approach?
Yeah, that's a big question. There's a lot of different opinions about it right now in the space, and a lot of that comes from the uncertainty around it. As you know, we have the 3-tier system in the United States today that is an integral part of the beer distribution world, and being the second tier in that system. With the introduction of the Farm Bill and the THC Delta 9 drinks, it kind of skirts around that. Beer distributors are uniquely positioned to provide different subsets of products into the market, and they have the lanes in order to distribute those products. But it's always been done with a responsibility of adhering to a 3-tier system, and there's a reason that exists. Right now, THC drinks live in a gray area, and that is what kind of drives a lot of the fear around the product. Like you mentioned, you don't know if the government's going to come in and change the law and restrict ability to sell it. And right now, I think beer distributors are correctly lobbying for some kind of regulation to take place within that space. And so I think once regulation does enter into the THC or Delta 9 drinks, you'll see a lot more optimism around it. With that being said, distributors who are successful in distributing it are seeing good margin on it, are seeing that it can help bridge the gap between maybe that volume drop that they're seeing in traditional beer and alcohol, and help pad the profit margins just a little bit as it relates to bringing in new SKUs. The same applies for non-alc and the RTDs. They're helping to fill some of those gaps between traditional alcohol and what else is out there.
Let's stay on the topic of legislation and then go over to non-alcs. Mm-hmm. And so in that same meeting, another hot button topic was the exclusive partnership with Live Nation and Athletic. And that's something that with the legislation currently for beer, they don't get that opportunity. And so there was a lot of frustration there around, we also want to be able to do larger relationship building commitments to get our products out into market. And so I'm seeing a little bit of frustration there, but at the same time, there's also a need of maybe we need to relook at how we are having policy around alcohol itself. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of concern around the health benefits of being sober, or potentially some of the health negatives around alcohol versus other substances. Now, there could be a lot of noise there, and maybe there needs to be a change in legislation around alcohol itself. Not overwriting everything that we've done, but maybe making it a little bit more conducive for the distributors to play a space in that. Whether it is some of the smaller microbreweries and those brands working through that distribution network instead of self-distributing directly, there could be some benefits around the power that a distribution company can bring to those brands and the push they can get it out into the market. So maybe there needs to be a look at the role that the distributors play and policy around that in the alcohol space. I'm curious if other customers are coming to you with thoughts around the role of the distributor in that current legislative process, where they can be bringing some feedback, where they can be bringing some insights into the power that distributors can bring to that space. What are your thoughts there? Are you hearing anything as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think first of all, as it relates to how distributors are feeling about, you mentioned the health benefits or maybe some of the recent news talking about the potential risks of alcohol consumption. I know that for a long time, distributors and our government have agreed that alcohol consumption in moderation is a perfectly acceptable thing for an adult to do. And more recently, the government has taken a stronger stance in talking about some of the risks of consumption. With that are concerns from the alcohol industry in terms of where that comes from, because the data doesn't necessarily agree with what's being put out there. It just basically creates a lot of uncertainty in the market, which beer distributors are concerned about.
So with that uncertainty, we already talked about some of the alternate substances or non-alcs. We're also seeing an adoption into actual snacks, moving away from whether it's beer or beverage, but also becoming like a consumer distributor. For what consumers are going to those stores to purchase, can I provide more of that? Use my existing distribution network that is set up to get product directly into the hands of those retailers. So that's a really interesting change, because now, previously I was competing against my other distribution competitors. Maybe I was competing against beverage, where if I was on the fence between getting a soda or getting a beer, maybe I could be swayed one way or the other. Now my distribution customers are entering a completely different realm of competing against a wide variety of distribution partners. So what are the complexities that brings to the forefront, and what are distributors doing to potentially position themselves to be in a better spot to be that best-in-class service provider for those retailers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think primarily, you nailed it. The lines of competition are kind of becoming more blurred in the space. Years back, beer distributors largely just competed against other beer distributors. And nowadays, beer distributors are taking on more soft drinks, growing those brands, and in that way competing against beverage distributors. And with the adoption of snack foods and being able to distribute that into their retail locations, you're seeing another layer of competition there. So there's one kind of layer that's external, that's in the retail location that you're dealing with these other competitors, but there's also the complexities of what happens in your operations when you take on these different SKUs. Packaging in the beer space I wouldn't call it uniform, but you get used to similar packaging in a space, and you have to deal with suppliers changing that every now and again. But when you take on packages from now soft drinks or sports drinks, or sometimes you see these like kids drinks that have all kinds of different ways of bringing product into a store, it introduces complexities that most people don't think about when they go and pick something up off the shelf. Add in snacks and now bags, and how do you get that into a store without damaging or popping something? And there's other layers there as well. So it just introduces a lot more complexity into operations, and people or distributors are really turning to technology to helping them manage varied SKUs, how to do packouts appropriately in trailers, all of that. And again, going back to what to carry and why. Is it profitable, and am I maximizing my shelf space? So that's one thing that distributors are looking at.
So if I'm an individual leading a distributor's operations, and I've got to now work around a complex mix of inventory, what are some of those innovations that they're looking to help with that fundamental change in how they are maybe building those orders today or delivering them? But also, there's only so much finite warehouse space. How do I best utilize technology, innovation, or change management within that facility to best utilize that space, but also create some efficiencies within that process as well?
Yeah, I think we're in a really exciting time in the space where there are a lot of options out there, a lot of things to look at. As we know, every distribution center we go into, or every beer distributorship we visit, we notice differences. We notice different ways they go to market, and so these different technologies are able to kind of fit in where they're needed. You go from full-scale automation all the way down to kind of islands of automation, like you might see in our solutions. But I'd like to turn that around on you a little bit and say, I mean, you've seen a lot in this space, and you've worked not just in the beer industry but in others. And when you go into some of these sites, I guess what excites you about some of the technology you're seeing?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions with innovation or adopting tech is that it's going to eliminate roles or reduce the need for people. That's never going away. The other thing that's never going to go away is just that labor, especially today with the rise in a preference for gig economy versus some manual roles, there's going to be constraints and turnover within those sites. So a lot of the innovation that I have seen be more widely adopted and embraced is technology that benefits the human. So it's not replacing the human, it actually benefits them. And so some of those things are reducing the need for physical labor to pick cases multiple times through that process. Can I pick it once in the warehouse and once in at the point of delivery where I'm taking it off that pallet, putting it on the shelf? So there's some things where they're rooting out maybe some of the stuff that is more conducive to injury or would turn someone away. So that's one big theme that I'm seeing. You're starting to see a lot more high-end technology, whether that be automation, AI, or even robotics or AMRs. Those are definitely the hot button things there. There's a lot of noise in which technology is the best one. I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet for any one piece of tech within a warehouse. There's just too many variables. You mentioned it. Every distribution center is different. But it's looking at what's the need that I have for this site, what is my appetite for change, because that's a big thing, and then what my budget is. And you can go, we're talking about Eagle Rock, they are just putting in a massive automation deployment within one of their facilities. That's going to have a 10-year plus payback. But they're okay with that. Mm-hmm. They see the long-term benefit. They're going to be here in this space for a long time, and they're good with that. Not every distributor may have that budget or that willingness to have a payback that long. Mm-hmm. So now you're looking at semi-automated systems where I can maybe automate the wrapping or automating the QC process using AI to do that. Or I might be dipping into AMRs where maybe I still have humans doing the picking, but I also have AMRs doing, maybe it's your bulk where they're just going through one pick path, picking all the bulk stuff, and then humans are doing top offs. There's a way where you can have a handshake between tech and automation and humans that works really well. You drop down that investment, now your payback's faster. Now you can be a little bit more nimble. One fear of those fully automated sites is everything we just talked about before, the changing mix in what my portfolio may look like. And is my automation ready to handle that sort of change? Not all of it is. And so you've got to be really considerate on what your business is going to look like today, 18 months from now, 10 years from now, and make sure that you're putting in something that's going to last. And so that's a couple of things that I'm seeing. What's got me personally excited is the rise of AI and what you can do when you start to leverage images, videos, digital content in the warehouse, and that handoff between warehouse and delivery. And so if we can do some things in the warehouse while we're intermingling standard practices, picking, packing, wrapping, and shipping, what can I do with some tech there? What can I do when I image it that I can use to help my driver, my merchandiser, the customer itself? That's really exciting, right? There's been this divide for a long time between warehouse and delivery. They've got their own preferences. They're compensated. They are focused on different things. There's been a little bit of I don't want to say combative relationship, but they're looking out for themselves. I think technology is one way where you can bridge that gap, and now it becomes a team effort to get product from the warehouse to the customer with as few touches as possible, making the humans more efficient, and then providing just a higher level of service to the customer and the end user.
I do want to focus in on what you mentioned in terms of empowering the humans that are building the orders or delivering the product, and really helping these distributorships grow. I think that's a really important piece. It's very rare that I talk to a distributor who is looking to cut headcount. Instead, they're looking to empower their people. Mm-hmm. I think we know that delivery drivers in general are kind of the backbone of America. And the last thing that I hear distributors talk about wanting to do is like I said, eliminate that headcount. Instead, they're talking about improving the livelihood of their employees and doing that through technology. And that's one thing I really enjoy about working in the beer space is most of the leaders we talk to in the beer space have built orders in the warehouse, mm-hmm. have been out on trucks. So they understand the difficulties of those jobs, the complexities of those jobs, and they want to make their people's jobs easier, their livelihoods better for when they go back to their families. So using it in technology to empower that is pretty cool.
I couldn't agree more with that. The last topic I wanted to touch on with you, and we could spend hours talking about it, but it's very easy to say distributors need to innovate, they need to change with the market environments, their internal, whether it's restraints or challenges that they're dealing with. It's very easy to talk about innovating. It's really hard to do it well. And so I want to spend some time with you as you talk to some of your customers and they're thinking about if it's something as simple as, I say simple, but it's really not, something as simple as changing their pallet types or adding a pallet type, or maybe it's changing their delivery equipment, or it's some high-end innovation within the warehouse. It still comes around, what do I have to do as an organization to ready myself for change and to create a culture of acceptance that this is a great thing for us and we need to go all in, versus maybe I do this in a more siloed approach, or there's not consensus on what we need to do, and then you start to see the challenges there. Mm-hmm. What have you seen work well as far as customers getting ready for change or ready for adoption of a new product or a new technology? What are some common things that you would say if you could talk to a listener that is thinking about adopting something? What would be the things that you'd say, you've got to be thinking of this?
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit. I think it can be easy at times for people to look at a solution and say, this is really simple. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this job for a long time. It's really simple to implement. And oftentimes it's more difficult to see outside of your own purview and see how it can impact not only other departments, but maybe downstream to your customers and everything else. One thing we run into a decent amount is people who want to take ownership of a project, and they fall in love with a problem and they want to solve it, which is great for us to work with. But one of the challenges with that is they might take extreme ownership to the point where they don't want to involve other parties or don't understand the other stakeholders that should be involved in order to make sure that everything is accounted for. Because like you had mentioned, the changing of a pallet type might seem simple, but the reality is these businesses are complex, and there are layers and layers to every change that's made. And they really require a lot of thought and consideration. So I'd say in order to be successful in implementing any new technology or innovation, it's really getting all of the noise out of the way early. And you do that by talking cross-departmentally to every different group that what you're considering might impact. And it could just be something really high level at first, and just getting people's thoughts and opinions on how it might impact them so that you know when to involve them later. But really one of the worst things we can see happen when you're trying to implement technology or innovation is closing those other groups out and keeping everything to yourself. That's when surprises pop up in the 11th hour, and projects can get stalled as a result.
Now you got a smirk on your face, so I'm sure there's a story behind it. Have you seen it go sideways?
I have a few times, and it's always a little bit disappointing because there's a lot of excitement when things get moving quickly, and you get buy-in from a bunch of different groups, and only to realize you left a group out. And we've gotten all the way to the point of installing equipment and finding out that maybe we didn't include a very important group that had the power to say no, but might not have been considered because they didn't have the power to say yes. And that's one thing that we have to consider a lot on the sales side of things, but I don't think everybody necessarily considers when you're looking to implement a new project, is who has the power to say no and why. There's normally a very good reason of why.
Sure.
And you really need to think through making sure they're a part of the conversation.
So communication is key, both from us, a supplier or a vendor, to the customer, but also inside the walls of that customer. Is there a single one individual that you can bring in early that can see that importance, see that reason for it, champion the communication internally? Who, if you're gonna, let's say we're bringing in a brand new warehouse tech, we're gonna completely change the way that they operate, and it's probably gonna have downstream impacts as well. Who's gonna be the first person that you try to seek out to talk to?
Well, we absolutely always try to go all the way to the top, and that's one thing I love about working in the beer space. Like I mentioned earlier, the accessibility of ownership or C-suite leaders is way more accessible than any other space I've worked in. We'll have, just as a surprise, the president of an organization jump into a call where we're just talking about our solutions. And when you can have that buy-in, not just from our side on the sales side of things, but internally, when you can get your C-suite executives or your owner to believe in the solution that you're going to bring, that messaging around the impact and how it aligns with company goals and objectives, that can get cascaded down in a much more powerful way. And so that would be that individual that we try to engage with.
And then is there just as much importance around working with the frontline people whose jobs will be impacted and getting buy-in from them early and helping them see why they're doing this versus letting it linger? Maybe there is that fear of what we talked about a moment ago. We're not trying to cut jobs. Mm-hmm. But how, as an individual, if you see a bunch of stuff coming in, would you not be fearful of this is going to impact me and potentially my job? So I'm assuming you would say at the same time also involving the people who hands are going to touch these products to get buy-in from them as well.
Absolutely. It goes along with what we were talking about earlier about getting every different group involved. And that includes the frontline employees and might be one of the more important groups to get involved. They're seeing things that oftentimes leadership doesn't have the ability to see, or might be a few years removed from. They might have lived in those shoes a decade ago, but the job has changed, and they might not have the same perspective. So, absolutely, that's a core part of it.
So we started off saying trends for 2025, but for some closing thoughts, what's got you excited about 2025 or 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. You alluded to it earlier. There's no slowdown as it relates to looking into and adopting new technologies and innovations. I think beer distributors are recognizing the crossroads they're at in terms of all this great new technology that's being injected into the space, along with the dip in volume that they're seeing this year and the uncertainty around when that's going to end. So I think the excitement is that there's a ton of opportunity to drive efficiencies, to make data-driven insights into your business and drive better decisions as a result. So I'm very excited, not just for our solutions that we're implementing at sites, but whenever we go into a new site like the one we're at today, and we're able to see what new things they're doing, it just gets me excited about the investments being made in technology in this space.
I'm going to echo that. I think one of the coolest things about the beer industry is how family prevalent it is. And now you're starting to have that next generation of people who work through the building and work those roles, but are now moving into those leadership roles. And they're all in on innovation. And it's an exciting time, and it's cool to see what this industry is going to look like in the next couple of years.
Absolutely.
Dan, thank you for spending some time with me today. It's been awesome. Always appreciate your insights, and couldn't have had a better conversation with you.
That was great, Clay. Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.